and things like that that come from some really cool places. So with that in mind, I will turn it over to our first team.
Justin the mic runner.
All right, and then
Hello, everyone. I'm Steven Sagandoy. I'm the project lead. I worked on doing the main code as well as the music composition.
Hello, I'm Sandy Rao. I was the main 2D animator.
Hello, my name is Jayamis. I was an overall generalist.
Hello, my name is Noah Morrison. I did character concept art and promotional art assets.
Hi, I'm Kai Fiala. I worked on the environmental and UI design.
Man, I've beaten all the other rhythm games. What do I play? Oh, this looks new. Let's try it out. Not bad. Cool controls, and the music is getting good.
So we've taken a lot of early inspirations from a multitude of different rhythm games, one of them being Demo, with their atmospheric storytelling. When they mix visual novel and rhythm game aspects, when you complete a song, you progress in the storyline. We also took inspiration from Rhythm Doctor with its pixel art visuals, as well as its horizontal rhythm game aspects. And finally, Guitar Hero with its performative play, as well as making the player feel as if they are an actual rock star. We aim to have the player be just like the robot controlling the machinery. So how are we different? As opposed to other keyboard rhythm games, as opposed to only using one input or a few, we decide to use the whole keyboard.
So for the story and concept, we went through a few iterations in pre-production. Oh yeah, the mic. The original concept of the game was a bullet hell space shooter with rhythm game elements. Then it changed to a vertical scrolling rhythm game that is set in space. The player is the captain of a ship that must transport luggage to another planet, but also fight off space pirates in order to get to their destination. For that iteration, the notes in the rhythm game would look like ammunition, so it looks like the player is getting attacked. Successfully blocking the notes would protect your ship. But then we settled on the final idea, which is a typing rhythm game. The protagonist, as you can see from the trailer, is Melody, a robot that wakes up in a long abandoned bunker. Melody sees that a human had accidentally trapped himself in this bunker and decides to escort him out of this place. In order to progress through the levels, Melody must interact with the machinery which activates the rhythm game portion of the game, and I think the typing rhythm game definitely felt more unique than a few of the previous iterations.
Early on, I wanted to make our project lead's job easier, so I handled a range of in-engine and generalized tasks, moving from UI layouts, running our itch page, and smaller in-engine tasks as well. Speaking of UI, I decided to settle on Fallout Shelter's room grid system to let our artists tease narrative elements through the art primarily, and along with Rhythm Heaven's level design system, which leads up to the final remix, similar how our characters progressing through the levels to their ascension back to the surface.
During the creative process for making the two characters, Melody and the Scavenger, I focused on making a few concepts to see which one would land best. We chose to pick out specific parts of the three designs and merge them into the final looks. After that, I created the base outlines of the sprites to get a sense of scale for not only the characters, but also the environment as well. Here we have some of the assets for the promotional work done for the game. I created the logo, the initial poster layouts, and as you can see, pixelated portraits of the two characters that are also found on the itch.io page.
All right, so I worked on the environments that our players can go through. I focused on creating rooms that felt abandoned over time, so adding those hidden dirt details, keeping things mostly dark and dirty, really added to the atmosphere of our players going through an abandoned bunker. For the main menu and some of the pause and setting screens, I took inspiration from old TVs to give it that out-of-date aspect. I added screen tears, keeping the color palettes pretty simple, just like early computers on, to give it the real idea of Melody looking through.
So for the art and animation, I worked on the sprite animation, portrait art for the dialogues, as well as cutscene art for the animation. I haven't really done pixel art animation before this game, but I have had experience with 2D animation. The same fundamentals transfer from 2D animation to pixel art animation, such as timing and smear frames, so there wasn't much of a learning curve for me to get over, yeah, it was a lot of fun actually to do the pixel art animation.
With the music itself, since it is Melody, our main character, a robot that's interacting and using her voice to control the machinery, the genre of the music that we chose is geared towards being more electronic and techno. As for the charting, I used a system called MIDI in order to precisely track and have the entire alphabet in the palm of my hands in order to have each note spawn with a specific letter, as well as also have specific functions that would also interact with the environment. As for the coding, since the game is made in Godot, I was able to use a modular system of scenes in order to easily create more levels and use the same coding scripts and scenes in order to easily implement new songs and cutscenes.
We had a marvelous opportunity for QA. I was able to test in 2 different schools over in the Trumbull County region, ranging from 5th graders to seniors set to graduate. A lot of their feedback, not only did we catch a lot of really great ideas and suggestions, but we also caught a lot of game-breaking bugs that helped our team fix on future and current running iterations.
In the future, we plan on submitting our game into 2 festivals, one of them being the 2025 G Learning Game Awards, as well as Indiecade, and maybe far in the future, Steam as well. Thank you, and that is our game. Galactica Melody, a typing rhythm game.
All right, first and foremost, I want to say the game's beautiful. I think you had me from the UI, which is a crazy start. I'm very critical on UI. It looks super good. I think the character art, I think everything about it just looks super cool. One question I have, and it kind of leads into one of your future plans. It's a learning games, and it kind of goes to my question, which is the typing that you're doing for the rhythm game related to the storyline? Because I haven't heard much about what you're actually typing and what the narrative is, and if there is like a correlation. And if so, how does that kind of lean into like learning games, if that's what that means?
I know initially we were thinking about trying to make it so that, maybe you're typing like, lyrics to the music that's relevant to the current plot. But having that sync up with the music as well is going to put a lot of work onto the lead who is doing the music and the code. So doing a lot of yeah, he's doing a lot of overtime over here. So to lighten up some of the work, we decided to like have it be certain phrases that are typed out and a few, ones and zeros to make it easier for some players. Because I don't know about a lot of you, but I don't really, whenever I type, I look at my keyboard. So there is a bit of a learning curve when trying to type whole sentences while only looking at the screen. So I think having some things not be a complete sentence would make it a little easier for the players to get into, but also we compromise by having some of the notes be words that are kind of relevant to what is happening with the story right now.
Okay, first thing I want to say, congratulations. This looks really cool. I think it's a very interesting concept. I do kind of gonna get the ugly question out of the way first. You showed a picture of a keyboard a couple of slides previously, and the letters didn't really look like letters. And I want to make sure that we were not using AI for this project, because those were not, it was not a QWERTY keyboard. And I understand if you just Google keyboard and it comes up, that's not necessarily your fault. But when you're working in a studio, these kinds of things are the difference between getting sued and just having a normal day. So did we make sure that we're not using AI?
We did not use AI. Like, all of our assets came from all of our teammates. All the art, pixel art. Yeah, we did not use AI for this project.
For the game project, I understand that, but for this presentation, I'm talking about the keyboard that was in this presentation. Because using AI to present your project makes it look like you don't care about your project. So please be very mindful of that moving forward. I want to ask a question about accessibility issues. Is there a way to possibly slow this down, reduce kind of some of the color things? My boyfriend actually is a competitive DDR player, which is insane stuff. But I watch him do all these settings and, reduce the speed of like the way things scroll and stuff. And I was wondering, is that something that you brought into consideration when working on this project?
Yep. So we have the option of having note offsets as well as controlling the note speeds. I also have 3 different difficulties per song, a easy, medium, and hard difficulty. So yeah, there's difficulties for each kind of player.
Okay, that's awesome, thank you. Lastly, I want to say I really like the idea of gating kind of the process in the game behind your companion. I think that's a great way to kind of slow down players, because some people, type 130 words per minute and will fly right through the game. And I think kind of slowing it down, hiding it behind kind of more story and more behind your companion was a really smart choice to make sure that your player gets enough screen time in on the game.
Thank you.
So first thing that I noticed, who's the generalist on the team? No. Don't ever sell yourself as a generalist. When game companies see that, they're going to assume that you don't know how to do anything. So state exactly what you did, right? That would be the first thing that I would say. I like the idea of it, of like, a typing game, set the music and all that. But I'm curious if like other tracks come into play, because if you look at like Guitar Hero or what's that rock one? Thank you. I'm old. If you look at like Rock Band, they have like multiple track lines for each instrument, right? Is there anything coming with that?
Currently, it's just a
the one
singular
track? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it stays competitive or enough, or that it hooks the player in with just the one track?
Oh, Rhythm Doctor.
With one of our inspirations, Rhythm Doctor, they also, some of their songs also use a singular track, but they also have the option of also using multitude of tracks. So maybe in future implementations, we could delve into using multiple lines as well.
Yeah, I mean, something to think about, you know, throwing in the shift key or control or periods or punctuation, that kind of thing.
Yeah, great work. I really love the presentation, the cohesiveness of the visual style, the color palette. One comment on the color palette is the notes when they come across, they are in the color palette, and so I feel like they might fade sometimes a little bit too much in. So maybe experiment with, you know, tweaking the color there or adding it as an accessibility option to be able to change the notes. I had the same note about the generalist, and I would recommend not calling yourself a generalist. And there's always other ways of putting it. So if you don't want to communicate you are the lead programmer, support programmer, or, you know, it sounds like you did UI engineering and did the marketing asset design. So those, you know, once you started saying kind of how you contributed to the project, I was like, oh, that's, you know, what you did. But when it's a generalist, that's just a big kind of giant question mark. And then the only other thing is I think there is a big opportunity to, I know you mentioned that there's a lot of work with adding lyrics, but like there's a game called Eichenfell. It's a lane-based turn RPG, and they have, you know, great music, but in the boss battles, those boss battles have lyrics to them, and it makes those boss battles feel like extra, you know, like, I don't know, it just amps up the hype. So you might be able to experiment with, you know, only adding lyrics to some of the, you know, songs right before a big story beat, just to kind of add that extra emphasis. But great work.
Thank you.
Looks like I don't need to. All right. Yay.
The microphones are behind you on the chair. Get these three. Okay, you ready? Hi, my name is Darren Vanyo. I was the project lead, environmental artist, and lead writer for our game Westgate.
Hi, I'm Brady Haynes. I was the game programmer and a sprite editor for Westgate.
Hi, I'm Nick. I'm a 2D artist.
Hi, I'm Alex Lindy Smith. I worked on the character design for our main character, and I worked on a majority of the main character sprites.
Hello, I'm Nathan Jones, and I was the lead level designer and also helped out with some of the background props.
Okay. So at the beginning of the semester, our team knew that we wanted to make a Metroidvania, but we didn't know what direction we wanted to take it. Early conversations we had involved modern-day problems like the growing popularity of AI, which opened things up to the genre of cyberpunk. But we wanted to make something that would stand out from the crowd. We had this idea from an animatic about a techno cowboy, which was essentially a cyborg gunslinger that was super colorful and lit up by lights. We took this idea and deconstructed it down to a Western aesthetic with some cyberpunk implications, hence our game. So what are Metroidvanias? These are games in which you navigate a giant maze in a non-linear fashion to discover items that help you progress. and cyberpunk is a genre of media with a particular aesthetic we wanted to capture. To understand cyberpunk, we studied different forms of media to understand common tropes from novels, color palettes, and narratives within movies, and gameplay that best fit the style. We did this with the intention of identifying untapped potential by developers for these specific games. And to summarize, we define cyberpunk as a genre that explores themes and questions centered around social and economic class issues, what it means to be a human, and the late-stage effects of capitalism and technological advancements on society and the world. With what we learned, we wanted to make a game that was more than just guys in trench coats doing slow-mo bullet time. We did a playthrough of some Metroidvanias to understand a little bit more about the kind of game that we were making. That included playing games like Super Metroid, Castlevania, Axiom Verge, and Hollow Knight for some gameplay examples to help push us in the right direction. Do we want more Metroid or did we want more Vania? We ended up gearing more towards the Vania route, or the Metroid route, my bad. So what is Westgate? In the town of Westgate, the player discovers that all the people have gone missing. You must ready yourself and head to the mines located underneath the town to find the people that have been taken. The town is slowly being transformed to a cryptocurrency mining site by forcing people to mine crypto. But who took these people? This is being done by evil AI entities from the big city. This infiltration of AI has even affected the wildlife, making the cacti of the desert become sentient and standing in your way, along with rogue sheriff robots that try to stop you from saving the enslaved people. As you explore, you find interesting technology and beautiful crystals that never get harvested due to them being made irrelevant by cryptocurrency. The player also finds upgrades that allows them to dodge attacks or get to higher places. What is the history of this town and this world? And how did this all come to be?
So one of our main goals for this game was to set ourselves apart from other cyberpunk media. So I wanted that to reflect in our main character. I wanted our main character to avoid the common theme of being a Caucasian man in a trench coat, as we have mentioned. So instead, I made our main character a woman of color with vitiligo. As for character inspirations, I went with a couple interesting ones, such as the Yellow Soul from the Undertale Yellow fan game, Ash from Overwatch, and Applejack from My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Obviously, that last one is a little bit humorous, but I did want to include that anyway. So going back to our character having different skin tones and markings, some of those more difficult sprite edits had to do with design choice, such as the different colors of each hand. Each sprite had to have different variants for left and right, along with one side with no arm for the shooting arm overlay. Also, some of those details had to be simplified to fit a pixel art style, such as hair detail, and some facial markings had to be omitted in the final design. Another important detail was trying to fit the black cowgirl hat into the backgrounds, as it sometimes would blend in with darker colors. While everything did require edits, such as adding the pickaxe or accounting for the shooting arm over top overlay, I did about 54 sprites in total, half left, half right.
So my main role in this game project as an artist was enemy design. So I started out with the design process with sketching drawings of how I wanted the objects to look like. And so the main enemies that came up were a robot cowboy and a cactus. And the cowboy acts as a ranged enemy. Actually, no, a cowboy does, but the cactus acts as a block. And so some inspirations for my art were old Western films like Good, Bad, and the Ugly, but transferred to pixel form. And some setbacks I had was learning 2D animation.
For the environment, I wanted to create something that had more identity than just using the most popular assets on the market. I took some references from pixel art games like Stardew Valley and Westerado to help me get started on assets for our game. I started with the mines, as that would be the most work, then moved on to the town. I wanted the mines to have a more muted palette, as opposed to the town that'll be much brighter and saturated. Though the mines have some colorful crystals for some cool, bright visuals to look at as you explore. Among the tile sets I made, I also had some animations for our boss that didn't make it into our demo, but I thought they were pretty cool. For the town, I wanted a very dry and dusty look for the props and buildings, like the town of Dirt from Rango. And I think some things that I did well was having some seamless tile sets that were super versatile, and something I wish I did differently was starting on the backgrounds earlier, as those provide the game with more depth and detail.
I first started by making simple sketches of the town and the mines. I designed the town to be very simple and easily navigable as a sort of a home base for the player to return to for possible NPC interactions and upgrades. I also added different dust and cloud blowing effects to make the town feel more alive and give it a subtle wasteland vibe. Thanks to our talented artists, I was able to easily create my vision using theirs and a little bit of my own assets made from the program Sprite. When I sketched the mine level out, I used Photoshop to do fake playthroughs of the level and created different what-if scenarios on how to maximize fun and player maneuverability. After I was satisfied with my design, I began implementing it in playtesting as I designed each section. The level was designed into one massive room and later divided into their own areas for the classic Metroidvania experience.
So coding for Westgate started pretty quickly after we landed on me being our sole programmer, and we decided on a Metroidvania for a game genre. I chose Game Maker Studio 2 because I had worked with it during a previous semester, and I was generally familiar with it. And I also wanted to take a new step forward in Game Maker by switching from GML Visual, which I had used last semester, to GML Code for this semester. There were quite a few things that I knew I wanted to incorporate pretty much off the bat, most of which I ended up getting to in one way or another, like the a la carte backdash there, or things like the player getting knocked back when they get hit, or the player's gun switching sides depending on which way they're moving and which way they're aiming. General functionality generally came pretty quick. I'd say most of my time on the project ended up being spent bug fixing and coding animations, surprisingly. The most challenging part of programming for this project was easily the coding for our enemies and the player's swing attack. Several times throughout this project, the enemy's code would just outright break, or the first implementation for the melee attack where the player would take damage every time they swung at the enemy because their hitbox was still colliding with the enemy technically, and it was kind of a nightmare to stay on top of that. But overall, I had a great time working with GML code, and it's honestly way easier to get things working properly in GML code than in GML Visual once you start getting to these larger scale projects. Game Maker is easily the game engine that has been the most kind to me as a programming-oriented game developer.
All right, hi guys, congratulations on finishing your game. Right off the bat, I'm glad that you explained what a Metroidvania is, because to be entirely honest with you, I have been in AAA gaming for 5 years and I have no idea what a Metroidvania is. So I would be very, very cautious about marketing and describing your game as a Metroidvania, because most people, it's a video game. Well, yeah, it's a Metroidvania. What the hell is a Metroidvania? What's Metroid? What's Castlevania? You have to, when you're marketing your game and when you're describing it, you have to basically think that this person knows nothing about video games. They've never heard of a video game. They don't know that they exist. Start there. And I think that a lot of times we get stuck in these traps of using other IPs to describe our work, and I think that does a very big disservice to your own work. So try to keep in mind staying away from that description. Another thing I want to mention is the environmental art for the, I guess, city. Who was the environment artist? Okay. Have you played Cyberpunk 2077?
Personally, I have not.
Okay. Have you watched any footage of it, seen pictures of it?
A very little, but yes.
Okay, so one thing that I think that Cyberpunk 2077 does really well, and I have a lot of gripes about this game, so it's rare that I'm praising it, is that the desert area is still cyberpunky. There's still, you know, neon signs and cool electric vehicles and weird things going on that stand out as cyberpunk. And I don't feel that the cyberpunk theme really comes across in the environment art for the city. And I think that that's something that you could expand on with looking at reference to other games like Cyberpunk or, you know, Deus Ex, the original Cyberpunk game. Thank you very much.
Understood, thank you.
Yeah, great work. One thing I would highly suggest, you know, looking into if you're expanding on this project is parallax. Just adding a parallax, you know, layer just adds so much more depth and so much more life to all your scenes. Another thing, this was mainly on the trailer. You had your mouse cursor in there. I would highly recommend either, you know, removing that from the trailer, or if you can't remove it, you know, in the, you know, implementing like a custom cursor, like a crosshair or something like that. That just makes everything feel a little bit more cohesive. And then as far as the art in some of the levels underground, there were some tiles that you walked behind, and they were like transparent. Those didn't quite read well, so I would either make those a little bit smaller and make them opaque, or just not have the character walk behind them. That was just a little bit jarring visually, I would say.
So I have some initial feedback. To me, the game doesn't make a whole lot of thematic sense. If you show me that trailer again, that's Westworld more than anything else. Like, I didn't get cyberpunk at all. So I'm not really too sure how that kind of ties in, other than the fact that the enemies are like AI, robots, whatsoever. But I'm curious, with Metroidvanias, you have like literal decades of reference material in games. What are you doing that's different?
So we decided to implicate a little bit more of the like mixture from big city to like rural, which I know Westworld, but we wanted to push the like Wild West aspect of that a lot further than we did Cyberpunk, but obviously pushed it a little bit too far, but that's what we were gearing for more, which is pushing it into that rural area.
So mechanically, what are you doing that's different?
So something we decided on pretty early was kind of having the player aim through using the cursor to kind of mimic this idea, not really idea, but the feeling you get from movies like The Matrix or cool cyberpunk games where like you're kind of this action hero where you're kind of shooting over your shoulder, or you're diving backwards and you're shooting at your enemies, right? So we wanted to kind of mimic that kind of feeling where you have the free reign of aiming and movement, and where you can kind of dodge past enemies like you're Neo from The Matrix, essentially.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, so I just want to ask about level design a bit. What inspired the design of your levels? Because at first glance, it does kind of look very like cluttered and almost like an afterthought at some points. And I just want to know what you guys did pre-planning wise, or like what inspired, I guess, the final product in terms of your layouts.
So, some of the layouts, if you're familiar with Oddworld games, that's somewhat of a Metroidvania. I kind of modeled things from that. Some of the areas were cluttered because our jump distance was a little short, so I had to put some things in some areas to compensate for that. I tried my best to make sure that the player could actually traverse from each different area as quickly and easily as possible.
Have you considered adjusting like the player's movement, how high they can jump to make for more, I guess, clear platforming instead of like a visually cluttered?
Yes, that is something we toyed with quite a bit during development. I ended up landing on the numbers that I did purely because it feels more or less like it feels like you're playing a Metroidvania, and it doesn't feel like it's going too fast. It's a vertical slice, so obviously we don't want you to finish the game in 10 minutes, but obviously, you want it to feel, you don't want to feel like a snail either, right?
Okay, and in the future, I would just be careful, because it sounds like you're basing your game around what a Metroidvania should be. I think you should be more confident in like what you guys have. I think instead of like scoping yourself so closely to a genre, you don't have to follow that. You can make it your own thing, and I would encourage you to explore that a little more. Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, what I was going to say kind of jumps off of what Grayson was talking about, and that going back to the idea that like you don't want your work to be derivative of some genre convention, something that already exists, because A, you don't really have anything to show for it that's like, this is what's unique about our project, and B, it kind of puts you into a box of like the possibilities of what you can do with your level design, with your encounter design. So like when I was watching the trailer, I got a little bit of like a cover shooter kind of aspect from like how you were controlling the character. And what you were saying about the like action hero, stuff that you want the player to be able to do, just kind of like sliding in, shooting behind their shoulder, that sort of thing. Like, that's cool. I think like putting everything towards that, that can really help your project stand out. And a lot of that is going to come down to just more polish in the animations, make the animations cooler, make the environments cooler, really figure out the metrics of your character's movement and like how exactly you want each enemy encounter to go, because it seems very combat oriented as well. Where was I going with this? Yeah, just having that clear intent from the start, I think, would have taken this further as well.
Okay, I'll try to be quick here because I have 2 main points. First off, for your trailer, I would definitely fix up the footage so that it shows the entire UI and screen. I think the reason that we're seeing the mouse, like someone mentioned earlier, is that I don't think it's actually a build of the game. I think it's a screen recording of the game in the engine. I get it. You're running out of time. You got to finish the trailer. I get it. Been there. So just in the future, probably do a recording of the build of the game so you see the UI and stuff like that. The second thing I want to talk about is kind of something that Grayson touched on a little bit, but level design in terms of a game where you can jump, particularly a 2D game, is extremely important. So a game like Mario, you're always going to be jumping the exact same height given certain parameters in every single level. And so they build each of the levels around the idea that Mario can only jump so high. So to try to be, sometimes I think programmers are like, well, it's a ghost in the machine. Sometimes he jumps this high and sometimes he jumps that high, But you need to be conscientious of how you designed your levels. Me and Grayson worked on a game called Spit It Out, which was co-op, and we wanted, we did designing around like how high do we want these guys to go, and being careful about how we designed the levels with that.
Good job. Yay.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Benjamin Brown, team lead, did some the art, game art, and coder.
Hi, I'm Colton Ewert. I did mostly game design or coding.
I'm Larno Law. I did character design, animation, and level design.
I'm Adam Riemann. I did level design, character animation, and character design as well. And this is our game, Feather and Leap.
So our game is called Feather and Leap, and it's a cooperative puzzle platform about 2 best friends, a frog named Finn and a stork named Wren, who must work together to save their swamp from corruption. Throughout the game, Finn and Wren collect seeds of purification in order to heal the land to its former glory. For the book cover art, we were inspired by classic children's stories like Frog and Toad and Princess and the Frog, or Princess and the Pony. We wanted to capture a warm, whimsical tone, something that immediately feels like a storybook, setting this tone before you even start playing.
For Finn and Ren, our characters, we took inspiration from games like Cats and Soup and Travel Frog. One key takeaway is the use of line weight. For Finn, we went through a multitude of iterations, including pixelated, but we moved away from that due to design changes. We had the original pose down as well. It was just kind of what we were looking for with that three-legged pose. He was drawn using Krita, again with that differing line weight. We actually changed some of the animations up. One of them being the carry, which was just a bulge in his mouth, is now he blows up like a giant balloon. It just adds to the playfulness and children's book aspect of the game.
When designing Ren, I created 4 different versions of the stork before reaching the final design. Some of these versions have realistic features that we wanted, like the bent legs and long neck, while others introduce more cartoonish elements, such as the big round head and the thick beak. Each of these versions helped us figure out what we wanted him to feel like and what fit best with the tone of the game. For the art style, we leaned toward a cartoonish style with some realistic touches. So for the walk, I use semi-realistic bent legs and slow steps and a slight head bob, which gives him the feel of a real bird moving with purpose, but still with enough exaggeration to feel fun and light. The death, beak attack, idle, and jump are more animated, while the walk, swim, and fly are based on real-life bird references. All of Ren's animations were created in Blender using hand-drawn keyframes. This allows us to stay within the cozy storybook aesthetic of the game.
So each of our characters each character in our game has unique abilities that make them special. Ren the Stork excels at aerial movement and interacting with the environment. So his 3 core abilities are flight, maneuvering heavy objects, and cutting rope. These allow him to reach high places. They allow him to trigger switches and free trap blocks. Our goal was to make Ren feel authentic to a stork, so we designed his actions to feel similar to a bird while ensuring they serve a gameplay purpose.
Can't talk.
Finn specializes in navigating water in tight spaces. His abilities include swimming, eating, and spitting. Swimming lets him access areas underwater. Eating allows him to hold small objects, and spitting can activate switches and other mechanisms. Finn's small size enables him to fit through narrow gaps, but while he's holding Ren, he can't fit through these because he becomes large. So this encourages strategic use of their abilities in their puzzle solving. To reflect our swamp setting and storybook tone, we created environmental mechanics that feel natural yet playful. These include stump-based pressure plates, wind fans, and stone doors. Many elements were designed with co-op in mind. So for example, the wheel requires a block to be dropped on it and then for both players to pass. Our goal was to keep interactions simple and playful so that it encourages players to solve puzzles through creative collaboration. Since we wanted the game to feel like a storybook, it made sense for it to operate like one as well. So using a plugin as a base, I built a system that zooms the player out of the level end and then into the book view where they can flip pages back and forth to reread text. And then when they flip to a new page, it zooms into the next chapter. The system functions in-game as you see, which reinforces the storybook feel while giving a break between puzzles.
For level 1's design, we really wanted to design puzzles that were easily completable. We didn't want the player spending 10 years on trying to figure out one puzzle and then for them to move on to the next 2. The layout of the levels are in sections, which is allowed more for that storybook kind of vibe. Each section is essentially one huge puzzle, with it being spread with mini puzzles throughout that separate the switches, opening the big door, allowing for the seed to be collected.
The levels are designed to start easy and slowly ramp up the complexity of the puzzles and timing challenges. Also, they are meant to lean into teamwork, so players are constantly solving puzzles and platforming challenges that can't be done solo. So you need both Finn and Ren working together, communicating and syncing up movements. The structure of the levels are linear, but we use verticality, alternate paths, and small detours to make it feel more dynamic while also having a clear beginning and end. While playtesting, one thing we noticed was players getting confused when they couldn't see what the partner was triggering. So we added visual and audio cues to levers and plates to make the cause and effect clear.
So here's a mock concept of the art in its infancy. The tile set on the right uses flat colors, broken lines, and minimal details, and was easier to place that way without worrying too much about everything tiling perfectly, while also staying true to the art style. Here is the level art for all 3 sections of the game. Since the swamp is corrupted, we used purple to set that mood, with dead trees and heavy fog in the background. The lights in the scene brighten up the background, simulating moonlight, to give contrast with the trees and tile set, as well as setting an overall color for the scene. For the camera design, we chose to use a dynamic camera system that zooms in and out based on where Finn and Ren are positioned. Instead of locking the camera to one player or forcing a split screen view, we wanted the world to feel continuous and connected. For the assets, we wanted to make sure they resembled objects you could find in a swamp environment, or at the very least, tailored some designs to fit the swamp environment, such as the water wheel. With the time that was given and the assets created, we were able to make 3 levels. And we will open up for questions and answers.
Great work. I love the presentation with the storybook. I think that's really clever, how you zoom into the pages for the levels. The frog, I think, would make a great plushie. I think you have the opportunity with the storybook to also include some of the storybook in the levels themselves. So there's a game, Thomas Was Alone, where there's a narrator and text that's in the levels. I think you could have like the text on the page say, and then, or like they discovered, and then you jump into that page and you figure out what they discovered. And that would just, I think, blend those two a little bit closer. And then the only other thing is I think you could add in just a little bit of parallax to the background, and it just opens up the feel of the levels a little bit. But great work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to start off saying congratulations. Good job in finishing the game. First thing I wanted to say was the background matte painting could honestly be like Disney key art. I think it is absolutely gorgeous. I think it really sold this kind of mystic, swampy kind of feel to it, and I absolutely love it. When speaking about level design, I love seeing level sketches in like a dot or grid paper, notebook, because that's my bread and butter. I love it. And I know that you mentioned, play testers getting lost and stuff, and then adding audio cues for when certain things are triggered. But I want to ask how much iteration on the puzzles was done in Engine? Like, was there a lot of, changing, I drew the level, I put it in there, I tested it and tested it and tested it and tested it, and I changed it a lot, or was it just kind of, they got lost, so let's add an audio cue?
I'll say that once we put everything in Engine, I'd say on average each level probably went through about 3 changes. Like, it's more we'd find certain sections had problems, and then we'd have to change those to account for what problems we had. So, for example, the jump height we had to change to fit a couple of our puzzles, but around 3, I'd say.
Okay, yeah, there is no golden number when it comes to iterations. There have been levels I've worked on for hundreds of hours, and others I've put maybe a dozen hours into. So I'm glad to hear that there was iteration in Engine and that we weren't super married to our sketches. I completely lost my train of thought now. Great. Anyway, somebody else while I remember.
I really like it, and it's not just because I worked on a game that was similar in concept. Our lawyers will be in contact. One thing that I really like about it is just like the uniqueness and really playing into like the silliness of some of their abilities. I love the frog like inflating and rolling around when he has something in his mouth. That's hilarious and just very cute. And also just playing around with the idea of like there are two characters, so like the frog's going to be kind of more ground and the water, so kind of more maybe slow moving, while the bird is going to be more airy in how it feels to play, which I think I'm kind of getting. I'd have to actually play it to see. One thing I wanted to ask, with a co-op game, you do have to be really careful in terms of your level design, especially if two players are in the same level together, to make sure that they don't lock themselves into a scenario. So one potential, so I guess I wanted to ask if you have any fail-safes for that. For example, in some of the video, I saw that there's a part where that turn dial and the bird goes up and cuts it and falls down. Well, what if the frog isn't right there when that happens? It fell down. How do I reset it?
So we have a system in place where there's like a button on the wall. So if the block does come down, you can't like reset it. So you go up there and hit it and it resets for you.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's fantastic. That allows for, trial and error. That allows for like, oh, what does this do? Oh, it resets that. Oh, so cool. That's important with these co-op games. So yeah, no, that's great. Good job.
Thank you. Yeah.
They call blueprints Metroid Brain. No, Obra Dinn is one too. No, no. I thought so too. No, 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 you're not wrong. Something must have happened. Go check the cruise. This is it. Oh, wait, yep.
Hi, I'm Dawson Turska, and I'm the project manager, lead programmer, and art director for this project.
Hello, I'm Jalen. I am the level designer for our town scene.
My name is Tyler Sisley, and I'm the lead level designer.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Hansen. I assisted in level designing and coding.
I'm Autumn Lewis, and I worked on the user interface.
Hello, my name is Joseph Berlin, and I was an animator and coder.
My name is Logan Jackson. I did character rigging and animation.
My name is Jada Woods. I worked on art and animation.
And this is Shopkeeper's Tale. So, Shopkeeper's Tale is a game of dungeon crawling, maintaining your shop, and rebuilding your town of Radiant Hills. Early on, we knew that this game was going to be about the dungeon and crawling and shopkeeping aspects, but after a lot of stylistic decisions were made after the gameplay all came together. For example, early development incorporated the usage of a timer with intentions to use it in dungeons for level of intensity, having to go in, gather resources, and get them out. After a lot of playtesting and a lot of work on the style, we kind of figured that it doesn't really fit with the cozy vibe, and instead we opted for a more linear dungeon design as what you see here. Early design was hand-drawn 2D, with the intention being to utilize hand-drawn animations to create children's book-style graphics. But after the gameplay came together, we went the route of mixed media, combining claymation and traditional arts and crafts for the final result, taking inspiration from games such as Hylix. Going into more of the actual design process on the programming side, the game started out as a simple side-scroller, gather your resources and collect your materials, again, going into the process of that timer. This, it seems like it's taking a while. Yeah, so early on, this was actually probably like a few days after last semester's showcase, I basically just put together a little simple room layout, go through, break your things. You can see how much of the design actually persisted throughout development, but how much just changed over time. Obviously, the style was not very fleshed out at this point in time, but you still see the character design of the brave little shopkeeper, which is still one of my favorite little guys. Overall, the general focus of the game was ultimately resource gathering to implement into a shopkeeping loop, with the idea being to collect things, take them back to the town, and sell.
When deciding what we want the game to look like, we decided to go with a handmade, crafty look. So to do this, we handcrafted many of the assets in the game. This started with a bunch of pre-planning, deciding what we needed to make physically as opposed to digitally, and then we moved straight into the crafting process. With these trees you see on screen, I personally laser cut those out of cardboard and wood, and spent a lot of time sticking yarn pom-poms on them just to make sure it looked really crafty and fun. And we used anything we can get our hands on, like wood, paint, hot glue, tape, just to make all our assets. We kind of split our team into two groups, one working on, say, houses, and the other working on a tile set, as you can see on screen here. And I say this whole process took about 3 weeks. Just 3 weeks of really getting our hands messy and crafting.
So an issue we had with creating these physical props is discovering how to make the normal maps for these props. A normal map is a technique used to calculate how much light would bounce off a given object. It is done by a red, green, and blue light to give the computer a sense of depth of the object. So how we solved this was Dawson on Instagram found a reel by Roland Sear using LEDs to create normal maps for physical items. So we got the GVMs from the SRL, and Jada was able to get us into the blank lab, so we were able to get a camera set up that was in the correct angle for our game and take photos using these GVMs to create the normal maps. And then, of course, Logan had to hold the green light so we were able to get it into the right place. And then we also had a little bit of fun, and we're joking around making a cult for that green light. And then that is what got us the dynamic lighting for the game.
All right, so for environmental design within this project, we split it into two distinct categories: the town side, which was handled by Jalen, and the dungeon side, which was handled by myself. The town was designed small to create a sense of homeliness and give the player a sense of familiarity right away, as well as introduce a tightly knit sense of camaraderie between the player and the townsfolk. The player will find their home, shop, and various townsfolk to interact with, each having a unique mechanic that the player will make use of throughout their time spent within the game. The dungeon was designed with a sense of exploration and complexity tied together by the cozy atmosphere. Initially designed to simply be an area where the player was able to gather materials, this turned into a fully fledged dungeon with combat and puzzles alongside areas to gather materials that they can return and sell inside of their shop. The playable dungeon features simple encounter design created from a straightforward flowchart approach, taking segments of the dungeon separated by a lock and key system and further fleshing them out by separating rooms designated by resource, puzzle, and combat categories.
Once we locked in on using the claymation approach of animation, which I just kind of want to give a small shout out to Titus and Pan, a couple of very seasoned Blender guys that helped us get everything together. Anyways, character designs were then taken from the 2D drawing of hand-drawn approach to more 3D models. To do this, however, we needed to put a lot more emphasis on effective turnarounds to ensure readability at your various angles. We had to make sure everything was going up, right, left, down, etc. And part of that, it became just like unique silhouettes, unique shapes. Additionally, we also outsourced work to artist Grace McCormack to handle illustrations for the project and additional marketing materials which are used on the final itch page. But overall, I'm a big fan of the little guy style. It's just one of my favorite little aesthetics.
And then for the claymation style, we went with replicating it digitally using Blender. The biggest help to selling this effect was a clay shader that Dawson mentioned. When modeling these characters, we had to use a couple rules that we were following, with the main one being to use simple shapes, mostly subdivided cubes, to simulate blobs of clay that we could stretch and move around as needed. Many of the characters also have parts that can move independently. This helps sell the idea that we took pieces off and stuck them back on to animate them. Additionally, some of the characters have things like clothes or props that are made of other materials such as wood, cloth, or even metal to add to the mixed media, arts and crafts kind of style that we were going for. For example, Tobias, our turtle character, has a few different materials to differentiate him from his hat, staff, and apron. Ursa the bear has little metal wired glasses with glass lenses, and our Brave Mouse's sword resembles a tiny plastic sword pick that you might find poking out of a sandwich or a drink. And then for character animation, it was a lot of playing off of what we had already set up. For some of the more humanoid characters, it was still a very similar process to what you might expect, but thankfully, we were animating most of these at 6 frames per second, so we could focus more on adding things like secondary motion instead of worrying as much about getting enough poses. For a few of these characters, particularly the enemies, I got to have a little bit more fun with how I animated them because of how I set up their models. For example, I gave the little spitter bug toothpicks for limbs. So I was able to just bounce around the clay blobs and have him wave his little toothpick arms. For the roaches, I based them off of the little plastic cockroaches you might buy as a prank, but in this case, someone stuck some clay eyes onto them to make them less scary. So with the rigidness of the plastic body, I decided it would be fun to just let them scuttle toward you by leaning side to side. And for the boss, the centipede, you might notice that the frame rate has went up. This is, along with the obvious difference in scale, helps drive home the importance of this character in the fight you're about to have with it.
So one of the key aspects that we wanted to keep when creating our user interface design is keeping the interface cozy, simplistic, and adding that children fairy tale book aesthetic. For us to achieve this, we used the Chokokutai and Zane typefaces. We also focused on using an ornamental fairy tale design when creating the trimming around all of our interface boxes. This trimming design was based on Art Deco. And as a part of creating a visually memorable style, we used modern quality of life such as scalability and opacity, and we implemented it into our stylized user interface. And instead of having excessive buttons and icons, which is the opposite of a simple cozy game, we kept ours very simple with only having an inventory, health bars, and dialog boxes. We also wanted to make use of the type scale in our user interface to help contribute to the simplicity of the design, allowing the user interface to keep that cozy fairy tale book aesthetic.
Thank you. Very briefly, I'll just say thank you to everyone who helped out with this project.
Real quick, going back to generating normal maps using the color room, who thought of that?
So basically, we knew we needed, we were actually working with using normal maps on our character animations, and we were like, well, we would like to have like dynamic lighting. Actually, fellow student Steven Sagandoy was the one who threw us out the idea of using dynamic lighting in the first place. And then part of it, it was straight up just blind luck. I was just scrolling through Instagram, saw an account by the name of Roland Sear using a dynamic lighting setup for clay figurines. And my interpretation was like, hey, what if we use this for doing more like dynamic lighting in Unity engine, using it for game development?
So every time I do one of these, I always try to emphasize like, hey, what's the twist? What's the spin? That is really clever. My team is the photogrammetry team, so I'm used to scanning things all day. That is really freaking clever. Sell that for yourself. Like, hey, we couldn't do this. This is an obstacle we ran into, so we did this. Yeah, really clever. Really impressed.
Thank you. Although I will also say it was like a group of us all kind of coming together and figuring out, again, going back to like Pan and Titus, like these kind of just like a bunch of old heads coming together and being like, yeah, sorry, Scott, I know it's old, air quotes, but it was a lot of really talented people that helped and made this a reality. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I also want to echo, major kudos on the normal maps. Not only, I mean, you said it was kind of just luck with finding the real. I mean, that's selling yourself short because there's a big element of recreating something you've seen and reverse engineering that process. So I'm still just like blown away with that. Super cool. And then also just like the clay shader you had on the models. Like when I was watching the trailer originally, I'm like, did they make clay models for all of these? I mean, you really got them to match the rest of the art style and the physical props. So yeah, great work.
Really quick. All right. So I love everything you've done and everything you've shown. But in the gameplay, I saw 2D elements as well. What made you go with 2D and 3D instead of just fully committing to the 3D? Because I love everything about the 3D look.
So actually, originally, my idea was to go for like fully 3D using like fully Blender. But actually, it was team member Jada Woods that came up with using like the mixed media approach, which I got to tell you, was probably one of the greatest creative decisions that was made in terms of this project, because it really opened us up to like a lot of like the normal map thing, and like opened us up to all of these new options. So like, if anything, I just want to personally thank Jada for like throwing that out there. It was just really awesome.
Well, real quick, are you talking about like the red blobs? Oh yeah, I think they're talking about the projectiles and the red blobs.
So a lot of that is like at that point in time footage captured from like placeholder footage. So like but like a lot of that has been like added over time to replace with like Blender rendered animations.
I would actually say yeah, like be careful when you do that, and we talked about some of this. Like you go reshoot that. I know time is always a factor, but like always try to get that complete package as much as you can, because they do get they do become kind of jarring in it. But I mean, it's I love it. So
no, totally.
Yeah, to kind of bounce off of what Chris and Grayson both said is, I kind of feel like the trailer presented here could use a little bit more work. I would like to see more of that gameplay shopkeeping loop, the thing that will get me addicted in playing this for hours and hours and hours on end. I want to see a little bit more of that to kind of pull me into it. Going back to level design and when it comes to game design, I think that you had very good instinct to cut like the timed gameplay. Timed gameplay is relatively out of style. It was definitely something you saw back in the day. You don't really see it too much anymore, and it's because no one really likes it. And it really would have hurt the vibes of kind of like this cozy little cute game. You've got a good gameplay loop, and then all of a sudden panic for 3 minutes. No. So I think that was really good, like design instinct, and hold on to that design instinct, because that you can't teach design instinct. That comes from like playing. It comes from the heart. It comes from experience.
Yeah, I enjoyed everything. Everything looks good. I just had one thing that was like about the level and the camera. The way the level is kind of like the background environment is set up, it's kind of at an angle, so it's not flat. As the player was going like up and down, like in the center of the level, it looked fine, but as it went up, it was a little big scale. So I think just a simple fix, since you guys aren't totally 3D and you kind of use that 2D tile map type thing, is just reducing the scale of entities as they go above the screen or making them larger as they come down, just to fake the 3D and make it fit more into that 3D environment. Rather than going full 3D, you can kind of cheat that.
I just want to say I love that idea. Thank you. I will absolutely be stealing that.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Okay. I love it. We're sitting over here talking about it. Like, I love all your creative decisions. I love your cleverness with the normal apps, like echoing everything that everyone said. I am going to hit you for one thing, but just know that I like everything else a lot. Your UI needs a lot of work. I think it's just because the quality of everything else is so high that the UI stands out really badly. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. It needs a level of physicality that everything else has. So we were sitting over here talking about ideas like have it be arts and crafts as well, like have it be felt, have it be yarn. We were talking about other games that are similar, so like the Neverhood, which is completely claymation, and if you don't know what that is, you should really look into it. It's an awesome game. Or like Kirby Yarn, you know, of having that physicality to the UI. But I think you know that, and it probably was just a time thing, but that's what I would love to see in the next iteration of this.
Absolutely, will do. Thank you.
That's it. Yay, that's it. All right. Hey, I'll get up on the stage. So that's all. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the 2025 Spring Showcase. I don't know if people have set up their games out in the lobby, but typically we have folks gather in the lobby and play some games. So please join us out there. Otherwise, you know, have a safe travel back, and thank you for coming and celebrating our students' awesome work.